Well, good afternoon, everyone, and to some of you, it's a good morning. I'm Brenda Morris. I'm the Director of Produce Safety for AFDO, and on behalf of AFDO and the Produce Safety Committee, we'd like to welcome you today to this webinar that's titled Strategies to Promote Consistency in the Implementation of the Produce Safety Rule. So for this session, if you will, please refer to the email that you had yesterday for a link to the webpage where all the documents that will be discussed today are housed, as well as a PowerPoint that will allow you to make notes on throughout this presentation. I will also, in a few minutes, put this link in the chat box so that if you did not receive it or have not or misplaced it, you'll be able to go right to those links and sources that you'll need for today. We're going to, in this series, we're going to ask you today, instead of waiting until the end to ask questions, as the presenters go forward, go ahead and put your questions in the chat box because they would like to address them as they move along rather than wait until the end. So right where you have that question, go ahead and stick it in that chat box and you'll find that at the bottom of your screen. So I'd like to introduce you to today's presenters. We have Kristen Esch with FDA CIFSAN PSN. And prior to moving to FDA, Kristen worked for the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development for almost 20 years. 16 of those were spent conducting environmental and animal care inspections on livestock, cropping, and produce farms. The last 4 years were spent as the produce safety specialist developing the produce safety program for Michigan. We also have Rene Nieto, and he has been with the Texas Department of Agriculture Office of Produce Safety since 2017, where he served as the program coordinator. He has extensive background in regulatory program development and regulatory training. On behalf of AFDO, I am thrilled to turn this over to these two great presenters for our webinar today.
All right. Thank you, Brenda. Again, my name is Rene Nieto, and I'm with the Texas Department of Agriculture, Office of Produce Safety. Today, we're going to talk briefly about some of the things that we've been doing. Interesting enough, what we did here, or what we've been doing here in Texas, come to find out that Michigan was also doing the same thing, and it was based upon us talking to each other that we decided to collaborate and put something together to show not only what we did, but how we did it. And we believe that AFDO gave us a good opportunity to have the platform that we're utilizing today to present some of the things that we've done, how we've organized things, and more importantly, the importance of where to begin, I should say. Kristen?
Yeah, thanks, Renee and Brenda. I do want to start this off by saying that while I do work for FDA now, while this was all being developed, I was working for Michigan, and I want to thank Michigan for the opportunity to work on this with Renee. So most of the things I say here are going to be as if I was development with that in Michigan. So I'm not representing FDA in certain sections of this discussion. Yeah, so we really want this to be interactive. We want you all to please unmute or throw any comments, questions in the chat box. Renee and I are just going to go back and forth and kind of go through this program. Hopefully it's what you expected it will be, but our goal is to be very informal and very interactive. So please join in as much as you feel comfortable. And Renee, I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. Let's see. Share screen. Okay, is that coming up?
There it is.
There you go.
Okay, great.
All right, so let's start at the very beginning on why. Why are we doing this? Why did we put this together? Why, and more importantly, why are we having this webinar? And again, a lot of it is to share what we've done, what we've gathered, what we've organized as a way to, again, promote how a program can start, if haven't already, think about the consistency of implementing the rule. Okay. I myself guilty, waiting for FDA to put something together that would actually address a lot of the questions and gaps that we here in Texas were looking at, that we were finding, especially in regards to the rule. Definitely talking to my neighbor states, we were talking about, okay, there's got to be something more, and we just kept waiting. It just got to the point where we weren't going to wait anymore. We're not going to wait for FDA. We weren't going to wait for anybody else to tell us what we needed, especially what we needed to do. And so essentially just started gathering the information and the resources that were available, and started working on how to consistently put things in place so that we get the results that we're wanting to from this entire program. Okay. And when I say it's about promoting collaboration, that is the beginning of how we started here in Texas. It was a conversation between Oklahoma and Louisiana about what else do we need as we get ready to start doing inspections on large farms. Okay. It was because of our close communications between Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma, while we were all together in New Mexico, that we wanted to get people involved about what they needed and what we could possibly do in order to be successful out in the field implementing the rule. Okay, so keeping that in mind is the reason why we want to encourage discussion, not only within your own program, but with others, neighboring states, and then this, again, share what we have all put together one way or the other. Okay, Kristen?
Yeah, so same with Michigan is years ago there was an outbreak in Wisconsin, and we kind of figured that might spill into Michigan, and we kind of figure out, so there's farms in Michigan, there's farms in Wisconsin, Michigan has farms in Florida, in Georgia, and a lot of different places. The thought process is all about consistency, and while each individual person obviously is going to do things differently, they're going to inspect differently, they're going to act and talk differently, but the actual implementation and interpretation of the rule should never change from person to person. That needs to be consistent. And so we started talking with Wisconsin about how can we make sure that we're being consistent, not only within our own state, but also when we're working with other states. And so that kind of developed what we started in Michigan. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we ended up doing throughout the presentation. But I just wanted to set the stage here of what this program is meant to share. It's meant to share an overarching educational tool. This isn't meant to be a webinar that's going to teach you about a particular subject, I guess is what we're kind of going for here. So yeah, so that's why this webinar. And like Renee said, there's a lot of resources out there. We all know that. We probably already have them somewhere. We might have them in 10 different folders. The goal here was to provide all of these resources in an organized fashion. And we'll show you that agenda in a little bit, but also to provide it in one location, which AFTO has been so kind to host it on their website. So yeah, we'll get into all that as we move along.
And if I can also add, the time to criticize the rule and what agencies are doing or what they're not doing, that's over and done with at this point. We've got work to do. There's jobs that need to be done out in the field. And from my perspective, consistency is not about everybody using the same paperwork. It really is about establishing a foundation based upon knowledge and understanding of the rule. And if we don't have that, then definitely there's going to be gaps, not only within your own program, but as you work together and as we should with our neighbors. The other thing I want to say is that a lot of the things that we've done here in Texas is because we consistently talk to our neighbors. If it wasn't for the input of Matt from New Mexico, Justin from Oklahoma, John from Arkansas, and even Allison, Allison, a great collaborator on a lot of these things. If it wasn't for talking to those guys all the time, then yeah, we still would be struggling with a lot of the things that we're doing here in Texas. Okay, so why this program? We know that there's a lot of things that are out there that are provided from other agencies, but there's still one thing that consistently in talking with other states that was missing, which is a very in-depth dive into the rule in and of itself. Okay. And like I said, while a lot of us, Texas included, were waiting for FDA because it just made sense to us that FDA would do something like this. And the fact that they didn't, well, we decided we're going to do something for ourselves. Okay. Because essentially for those states that are implementing the rule under their own authority, we needed to make sure that those individuals who are going to be out in the field had everything they needed. Now, we're not just talking about flashlights now. We're talking about everything they need to implement the rule. And that really begins with, do they essentially understand and know what that rule is? Okay. Kristen?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about that before earlier, is that we were talking between states and saying, gosh, we really need this. Maybe some of you out there are already doing it, but at the time we weren't. And then thank goodness we were still able to see each other in person. And when Renee and I got to talking at IFP one year, we thought, holy cow, we're doing the same thing across the nation. Let's put it all together and let's share it with other states so that they don't have to do all this extra work to get up to this point. We've already done it. So our goal here is to share that with you today.
Now, it's also important to understand that, yes, there are other entities out there or other learning opportunities for us. And we're not here to criticize or to say that one's better than the other, but we also have to understand what the concept of those were to begin with. Okay. PSA grower training, a lot of good information. I think it's very good that they have a lot of that information that is based on the rules, but understand that it was focused on the growers. Okay, but it's a really good start to start building up that vocabulary so that anyone who's new to this can have that foundation of how to start communicating certain aspects of the rule and some of the expectations of the rule. The Train to Trainer program with that really focuses on effective communication and how to really engage during the classroom. But again, that was focused on the growers, as it should be, because that was the emphasis. Then we have the FD226. And I have a note here that says, don't bash FDA too much. Okay. But for those of us who remember the initial pilot program for FD226, it took a lot of work before it evolved into what it is today. FD226 was actually put together with the understanding that the inspectors who were being hired to do this job, whether it be FDA or the state, were new to agriculture or new to being on farms to begin with. So it was that mentality that was set in mind to begin with. And then we have the involvement of FD326, which is really about the investigation, but that's after the fact. That's not proactive, which is what the rule is initially supposed to be. We do have the on-farm readiness review. We in Texas thought it was a great idea. I think it's It's still a great idea, but we need a little bit more here in Texas. And so we decided not to do that strategy, but to do something a little bit different so that we could collect data, but more importantly, hold uh, farms accountable for the things that needed um, improvement. So it did establish a lot of good things, though, like those walk around questions. How do we get individuals to start talking about what they're currently doing? I think that was one of the good things about that. And it was really the first time things started being collectively put together in a way that kind of introduced how we were going to start talking to growers about these things. But everything up from FD226, 326, even the on-farm readiness review, it implies that people already have a deep knowledge and understanding of the rule. And what we were finding out is that many people, depending upon how they read the rule or when they got the rule or who introduced the rule to them, their perception or understanding of the rule is slightly different. Even in the systems thinking, I mean, the scenarios that FDA just did a couple of weeks ago, it was with the understanding that people should already know what the rule is. And I believe that that was a gap that we needed to somehow fill in. Okay. And this is where a lot of this stuff is coming from. Okay. Again, the strategy that we're implementing here in Texas is that consistency is not based on everyone utilizing the same paperwork. That does help, but it really goes into, do the guys in the field know the rule? Do they understand it so that they can make those determinations if the farm is meeting the minimum requirements of the standard? Kristen, you'd like to add anything?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate a few things is that all of these programs and trainings are great trainings. But as I was going through them, I noticed myself there was a lack of understanding of the rule. And I know a lot of folks that go through, because I used to be on the teaching cadre for the on-farm readiness review, train the trainers. And a lot of folks coming into that, I think almost every single time they said, gosh, I really need to know the rule more. And so I think through all of these programs, that was the thing that was lacking is not having experience of actually working through the rule. And I think that this program that Renee and I have kind of packaged together is meant to slide right in with all of those other programs and work in harmony with all of that, so that it's just another tool in your toolbox to help you, your program, your inspectors to become as good as we can and as consistent as we can in understanding the produce safety rule and helping our farms to do so. With the scenarios, the systems thinking workshop fitting in, and then at the end, we all want a successful calibration. Our inspectors, we want to make sure when our inspectors are getting a calibration, of course we don't want failure. And so this is just another thing to bolster that success.
And if I can also add just one more thing, while a lot of states are concerned about the calibration, being on that work group myself, a lot of what is being looked at as far as the calibration is based upon knowledge of the rule. And essentially the calibration, and I may be giving away too much, but that's what happens when they invite me to be on a work group.
No, you're good.
Okay. It really is about not only do you know the rule, but how do you know to make that determination of what is being seen that the farm is actually meeting that minimum requirement. Okay, that's what the calibration is going to be on. So it goes right back to how well do your inspectors know and understand the rule in order to implement in the field. Okay, so breaking it down, okay, if we take all the other stuff away, okay, what is the goal of the state programs? Again, dependent upon how you look at things. We strip everything down, okay? It's to effectively and consistently implement the produce safety rule, okay? How that gets done, okay? Essentially, for us here in Texas, is to three things, okay? First and foremost, education, okay? And then we have training, and then we have evaluations. But if we look at education as simply the systematic process of learning something to acquire knowledge, okay? It's that pursuit of knowledge, that learning to know, that within your program should be its own goal, its own thing to do, okay? And then we have training, okay, which is the process of learning something to perform a specific skill or behavior. Definitely, once we have that understanding and once we have that knowledge, that training then is to develop utilizing that knowledge and understanding to perform a particular skill. Okay? And then we have the evaluations that I believe should be a part of state programs. If not now, then you should be working on this to ensure that what is being done is actually giving you the results that you're looking for. Okay. Again, talking about three different concepts, there should be three different goals to achieve. Kristen?
No, I disagree with what you're saying. And the only thing that I want to add to this is that we are only going to be talking about the education portion of this in this discussion.
Okay, good. So keeping that in mind, okay, are the education goals established? Now, in my past, I've seen where a lot of people who want to cram together education and training. It's all there together. However, they're two different activities. Not saying that you can't follow up one with the other, especially when it comes to knowledge retention or application. But just think about, okay, just the education process to begin with. Okay, think about that new hire, that one individual knows nothing about the role. How are you going to get that individual to where you need them to be? Okay, so we look at education, but more importantly, within your process, do you have particular goals that need to be met so that you are confident that the individual is going to go out there with the understanding that they need of that particular role? Okay. After that, next question you need to ask is, are they being met? And how is that being met? Okay. Now, at the beginning of all of this, okay, we were looking at educating growers. Okay. We also should have been looking at educating the people who are going to be implementing the rules. Okay. But they should be at a higher standard or a higher understanding than the growers that they're going to be implementing to. Okay, so it's very common that at the very beginning, we're just thinking things in a particular way, a very linear way. We've got this, we got this, we got that. Okay, but at this point, we now have to consider the evolvement of education as we are doing more and more stuff in the field. Okay, especially when it comes to implementing the rule. Okay, determining compliance or determining the minimum requirements are being met. Now we've got to look at how all of that, okay, is interrelating to everything else, okay, with what we're trying to do. Kristen?
Yeah, I think at the beginning of this process, when the first cap came out, when the rule came out, it was such a push to help farmers, to educate farmers, to get that information out there. And I totally get that. I think the problem, though, is that, like Renee said, we missed educating our folks on the ground, our boots on the ground, and our inspectors, even our educators. I think we missed making sure that they understood the rule in order to be able to help educate farmers and help farmers in the way that we want to. And I think that some programs still might be stuck in that kind of roller coaster. And so they're forgetting still to add that big piece that we're going to be talking about today of understanding and going through the rule proper. So that's how I saw a lot of states at the beginning, including Michigan and myself, handling things at the beginning, because we really had our farmers' investment in mind and forgot about us.
And for here in Texas, a lot of it had to do with, okay, what was available to us? What could we possibly, where else could we go? It was the realization that our program is the one that makes inspectors, not going to the Safety Alliance class or the FD 226. That didn't make an inspector. What made the inspector is, did we give everything that they need in order to do the job effectively once they started doing inspections? And so that came completely from us. Okay. And it wasn't until we were sure that, yes, people knew what they were doing when they went to the farms, that we would send them on the farms to do this inspection work. So as we mentioned before, a lot of it was to pull resources into one location, okay? Because a lot of stuff was out there, a lot of stuff was being putting out there. And so at this point, let's look at what are the inventory resources that we have at this point, okay? Definitely a lot of the things are coming from FDA, the rule, okay? Definitely one of them, but there's more to the rule than just the rule in and of itself. The preamble has a lot of information that talks about the current thinking of the agency as the rule was being put together. Okay, I do know from talking to some of my CIFSAN contacts that a lot of the questions that they get from the R10 can be demonstrated or explained, okay, through going through the preamble. Okay, so the rule in of itself, yes, that's the context for everything, but it's the preamble also gives good insight to that, as well as the guidance. Okay, even though the guidance is still in draft mode, it really goes to putting examples. Okay, not all the examples, but definitely getting clearer pictures of what can be done. One of the things that we did here in Texas is that we developed our own frequently asked questions, things that we were getting asked quite a bit from, and we developed a lot of that stuff ourselves as a way to help ensure that the answers we were giving growers throughout the state was consistent. I think some of the things that came from the guidance tool, the at a glance document, I think those are really good to supplement a lot of the learning, a lot of the understanding, and definitely the fact sheets helped out quite a bit as well. We're going to be talking about a lot of this stuff as well. But we can't forego a lot of the things that the states then themselves have put together. And definitely, when we talk about the resources that are available, we definitely want to impart what the states are doing for themselves to further the knowledge and education of the people that are be doing the inspections. Kristen?
Yeah, we're going to go through a lot of this later, so I'll just wait until that slide comes up.
Okay.
Do you want to go through any of these?
I think we'll definitely talk about that when we go to the next areas.
Okay.
So other things to consider. Now, taking you back 2 years ago, when things were a little bit more mobile, we put this together in Texas as a face-to-face opportunity for the neighboring states, and then essentially for states that were gonna do inspections under their own authority. So the idea was to bring everyone together and to have these kind of and to have the one big type of classroom. Okay, so the makeup of the class initially was to bring more people into this, but it was never intended to be a lecture type situation. Okay. We did invite FDA, but we had to be careful about what their role was going to be. And I think, Kristen, you were talking about extension.
Yeah, so when we put something like this together, we invited multiple states. We also invited FDA. We invited both ORA and CIFSAN, although it was just or PSN, but it was just that came to this particular group, and we'll talk about why and how why it makes a difference during these discussions when we get into the bulk of the program after a quick break. But we also invited extension because the educators that I worked with, and as well as our North Central Region extension folks, some folks came. I heard a lot of folks from our education partners that if they don't know what we're doing, how are they supposed to best educate their farmers? So I thought that was a really good point. And so I thought, why are we keeping inspectors and educators separated? They should be in constant discussion because we're all trying to meet the same end goal. We might be doing it a little bit differently, but we want the same goal. So we need to have better communication. So that's why we invited extension. And again, we'll talk about the role of each person in this particular program of how, not how you have to do it, but how we did it a little bit later on.
And this is really one of the benefits of collaborating with Kristen, because I wasn't as open-minded. I was only thinking about the inspectors at the time because we really wanted to make sure that before we were going to do inspections in the field, that the inspectors, okay, were where they needed to be. But definitely, I see the point where getting an extension involved could have been beneficial. The other thing that you need to consider when putting the class together is the organizational structure and the process of each individual states. It's going to be different. We have to account for that. I think that's one of the things that that is lost, especially when we get information from other agencies or organizations, is that state processes, state organizations, state hierarchy are somewhat different. Just because they're neighbors doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing the exact same thing or they have the same kind of structure in place. Okay. I think the other thing is to consider who exactly is teaching the inspectors. Okay, who is that individual, and where does that support come from? Definitely giving someone the book and saying, "Hey, read this, and I'll get back to you later," might not be the best way to go about preparing guys for doing inspections in the field. So a lot of consideration has to be, put into who's actually doing the teaching for the inspectors, and more importantly, how are they being taught? Do they understand? Because what the teacher does, the student does. So if the teacher doesn't have a good, thorough understanding of the knowledge, that's the information that they're passing on to those individuals who are then going to take that information out there. And that's definitely something that we need to take into consideration. Kristen?
Yeah, and when we were looking at the learning needs of folks, we did 2 different types of activities throughout the few days that we were all together. Again, when we get into the bulk of the program, we'll talk about it. And I'm sorry that we keep saying that, but this is more of just kind of an introduction of what we're doing and why we're doing it. But yeah, we wanted to make sure that we took into account all the different types of learning needs. And we also wanted to make sure, again, that we had all the resources because at the time when we did our particular group, is we didn't have all the resources that we needed together in one location. And I think that now that I look back at it, that was definitely lacking. We could have been more prepared if we knew what was out there and how to utilize it. And I think that's a big portion of what we're going to work through today. Are there any thoughts, concerns, comments, questions, suggestions at this point in time? You can either unmute, raise your hand. Again, we want to be really interactive. Our next slide is actually a quick 5-minute break before we go into the actual bulk of the program. Actually, we've only been on for about 35 minutes. We can actually just keep right on going. If y'all would rather do that, I can leave that up to the group. If you want to just keep going rather than having a 5-minute break, just go ahead and raise your hand.
I don't think this thing's working. I think it's just me and you talking.
See lots of hands being raised.
Oh, okay. It was okay. Okay.
I see about 7 hands so far.
So you do have a question.
Okay,
I would like to hear what each state currently does for onboarding inspectors if we have time.
well, I think that'd be somewhat challenging that there's quite a few people on here, but I think it would be good to see the commonalities of it. Other than what's already there, as far as the PSA grower trainer, train to trainer, FD226, it would be good to know what everybody's doing. And again, we are not here trying to tell people that they're not doing it, as chances are there's a lot of you that are doing the exact same thing that we're talking about. We just want to put it out there so that everybody, have access to the resources that we're currently using.
So let me ask, we've got a few people with their hands still up. Are those people who would like to speak? If not, take your hand down. If you do want to say something, raise your hand and we will give you permission. Okay. Nope, everybody took their hand down. Again, put it in the chat box if you would like to. We can give you permission to speak and we'd love to hear from you.
Well, I just want to comment on Sarah's is same with Renee. I think that's a really good point. We actually talked about this before coming onto the webinar. We thought that folks would tell us, hey, I'm already doing this. So I'm hoping if we just chug along right now without a break, then we have this slated till 3:30. And if we have some time and folks are interested to hang on the line to talk about that, I'm sure that I would be curious to hear about it. So we'll try to do that, Sarah.
Yeah, and looking at the chat box, Justin chimed in, Justin from Oklahoma. Most people are doing the FDA, NASDA, the prerequisites, all the things that are already put to us. The educational opportunities that we talked about earlier. But again, it's going back to what else was needed. What is that one little bit that still needs to be done? And again, my opinion is that it need to spend time really breaking down the rule and going into the rule.
Okay, I'm going to let David Wood speak.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. How are y'all doing today?
Good, David. Hi.
Can everybody hear me okay? I lowered my hand and then I was trying to get my headset to work. So, Tuesday morning technical difficulties. So in the state of Georgia, we anytime we have a new inspector on board, obviously the necessary training, the FD226 training, PSA training, all that is standardized. But all of our inspectors go through our own in-state validations where we do basically a left seat, right seat inspection, training, familiarization, and then they are all essentially validated that they understand the rule, they understand what to look for during inspections before they're actually set out on their own to do inspections on their own. So a lot of the training happens with our inspectors that are already validated and have shown that they know the rule and are obviously following the rule, if that makes sense.
So David, if you don't mind, can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
So what is the validation? Like, how do you know that that person knows the rule, and who's the one that is the person that assesses whether or not they
So
know?
our assistant, we have our assistant program manager, myself, and one of our inspectors who actually is no longer with us, who was in charge of that. We have SOPs that we have written up that basically are that oversee inspections, go over all of our, what to expect during an inspection, what paperwork is needed, how to go through our inspection software that we're doing. So they go through all of this training, and then typically when they're doing the left seat, right seat inspections, they're with either the assistant program manager or one of the inspectors that she essentially has volunteered to be the instructional person on that. So during this last grant cycle, that was our main focus, was getting all of our newer inspectors, obviously 226 qualified, 326 qualified, and then that self-validated within our own program.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think that's kind of what Renee and I were discussing, is that we have a lot of great programs, a lot of great trainings, but for us, for Michigan and for Texas at the time, and a couple other states that we had involved, we wanted to take it further. We wanted to just delve into the actual rule itself and take quite a bit of time, to be honest. I mean, days to go through this as a group and discuss it. So that's what we're going to talk about next. I don't know, Brenda, if there's any more questions.
I am seeing none.
So one of the things that I have found since being with the program that we do that may be a point of topic of conversation as we go on, that Georgia does, is we also do concurrent training. So it's not like our new hires get training and they get validated and that's it. We do yearly concurrent training, or we do, if there's questions or comments or something changes within the rule, we typically do additional training to follow up if there are any questions or anything like that.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. Well, I saw a lot of hands, Renee, about just kind of moving forward. So I think people will take breaks as they need them, but we'll go ahead and move forward into the second portion of our program of actually getting into what we did.
Okay. So let's move here. So as Brenda talked about earlier, a lot of the information that we're going to be talking about or going over is actually on that that website that holds all this information. Okay. And that's essentially what we're going to be talking about a little bit. I mean, more so during this part of the presentation. And just to let you know that, yeah, we kind of, for the sake of this presentation, we broke it up into 8 parts. Keep in mind that this whole thing was put together with with these things, these points that it was meant to be. The way we put this thing together was first and foremost meant to be flexible, okay, so that the states can utilize the information as they saw fit. It's just essentially housing everything in a particular way and then putting things, there you go. And then essentially putting it in a way or a structure that that kind of worked upon itself. Okay, but the idea behind what we put together was so that it could be flexible. Okay, it was not meant to be a lecture type program, a lecture type education process. It really was to facilitate discussion, for people to talk and ask questions, and to really get into what they think, what they believe, or how it could be put together. Okay. In order to mainstream a lot of this stuff, we utilize the already available resources, most of which is given or put out by FDA. What we've done, because we know the FDA website kind of changes and then the links change and everything else, we took all of that stuff and we put it into one place in the areas that we thought would help to facilitate the understanding of the rule. Okay, so a lot of those additional resources are put together. If you know, in the outline, which is electronic form, as you see, that's up here, hyperlinked to everything that we're going to be talking about at this point. It also, in talking about the flexibility, we definitely want to encourage the states to utilize what they already have, just like what George is saying. They can implement some of their own things to reinforce state-specific or things that were based on state data, so that they can, you know, make it more their own. Okay, and then finally, utilizing other techniques to reinforce knowledge retention. Okay, such as the incorporation of scenarios, or like what they did in Michigan, they took it outside the classroom. Okay, all of these things are meant to, you know, reinforce that knowledge and learning opportunities. Kristen?
Yeah, thanks, Renee. So you can see on the screen here, I've put on the outline, and I'm hoping that you'll all refer to this outline as we go through, because you'll see in the next couple slides, we refer to part 1, part 2. And so we're going to actually go through this step by step of why we put this together here, and how we used it. And you can see, like Renee was saying, so we've hyperlinked everything. It's easy to use. It's all in one spot. So I just wanted to put that up there so you can see that as we go through the different parts.
Okay. So again, breaking it down into 8 parts. Part 1 is really, and this is the beginning of the outline. Okay, for those of you who already downloaded or have that up, it really was to set boundaries, okay, about what the class was, especially when we had different people, not only of different space, but different organizations out there as well. It was key to let people know that, you know, who from different states were there, who they represent and what they were doing. And then, of course, you know, what the roles and responsibilities of other people from other agencies were going to be. Okay, definitely it wasn't, again, FDA telling us what to do or how they would do it. It really was about the states generating and moving this information forward. And known to everybody that while we did have members of FDA in there, their real responsibility was talk about FDA's current thinking, and to ensure that we weren't going off the rails in our thinking while we were discussing a lot of the rules. Okay, it was also very important to set these boundaries, to say what we were not going to do. Okay, the meeting was not intended to make someone an inspector, but to bridge that gap with all the other programs that were in place, but to really focus on the produce safety rule. Okay, bringing everybody together from different states was not to create a platform to focus on the negative things about the rule. Okay, because we're way past that at this point. Okay, what we got is what we got. Okay, so the idea is, let's learn what we have, and then let's do what we can to implement this correctly. Okay, and so again, it was those kind of boundaries that we wanted to put right from the very beginning on what we were going to do, and more importantly, stay on focus. You know, regards to the class. Kristen?
Yeah, so we had, like I said before, FDA PSN in our group, and she was a key resource at that time. She didn't really talk too much during the whole thing. She knew going in that her role was to be a support. And so when we had questions, if she couldn't answer them directly, she'd be right on the computer talking to some SMEs. And then by the time our discussion was kind of winding up, she'd have the answer for us. And so, or we'd move on to another question until she could have the answer for us. So it really worked out very well that we weren't just stuck there, and us as a group without FDA trying to figure out, well, this is what we think, because that doesn't do anything, and that doesn't keep the ball moving forward. So I felt like it was integral to have her there. And like I said, she didn't say much. She wasn't part of our discussions for the most part. She was just there as a resource. We did have, I forgot to mention, we did have somebody from Produce Safety Alliance in attendance to ours as well. Again, because we felt the more the merrier, communication is key. And if PSA doesn't know what the farmers are thinking, how are they going to help develop trainings and those kind of things? So basically, though he was there at that point in time, he took notes. He did do some other things when we went outside, but he was really there to listen. So again, it's however you want to set this up for you and your states. You make those ground rules as you choose. We're just telling you how we did it at that time.
And let me also interject that while we did have FDA there, also we utilized in the same way that Kristen utilized her PSN CISFAN person there. But it was also very important to understand that it was PSM CISFAN that was there. We didn't invite ORA PSN in there because, well, again, my note says no cussing. Okay, we just didn't invite them. But the other thing is that we made sure that people understood that the course we were putting together was not to really beat up FDA and how they would write an observation if they saw this. Okay, it was really about the interpretation of the rule, the meaning based upon how it was written and why it was written, again, so that we wouldn't go too far off with what the intent of the rule was. Okay, so the idea then become, if we have a good understanding of the rule, then within your own process, whatever that process is, within that particular state, they can write their observations based upon what they needed for their own program. Now, this was one of the reasons why in Texas, I only invited the states that were doing inspections based on their own authority, because we didn't, at that time, we didn't know what FDA was going to do, with a lot of the stuff in regards to inspections, and we didn't want to contradict what they would probably do later on. Okay, so we just kept it really focused on the states that were doing it under their own authority. Part two, as you look into the outline, really starts with understanding to apply. Okay, it's the key concept to this whole entire thing. Okay, it really is to dive into the education portion of the rule. Okay, with the understanding that if we do not know and understand the rule, then we will have gaps with implementing it. Okay, effective application is what we're all striving to do, but that comes with the foundation of knowing and understanding the rule. Okay, and I think that's what's crucial. Okay, Kristen.
No, I think that's we're not going to talk a whole lot about part two right here because it's fairly simple, but the problem is that this is the meat. So this is where you would talk a lot about the rule and talk about making sure you understand what it means and how to apply it consistently. So while this slide is kind of a little bit faster than some of the other ones, it still is an important part of the whole thing.
Yeah, with the understanding that when we're talking about understanding to apply, again, when we start breaking things down and getting to understanding the rule, the first thing that we need to do is to learn the language that the rule is written in. Okay, this for us in Texas seemed to be the hardest thing that growers had to wrap their mind around. That this is a regulation about food, not about the farm. And so the terminologies that they were used to were more about the farm and USDA and whatever third-party audit they were associated with, and not necessarily food, okay, in regards to the produce safety rule. Okay, so the language becomes a very big part of really establishing the basis of communications. And again, if the grower is having a hard time with that, yeah, you can imagine how somebody who needs to explain it, okay, would have to be better educated in order to be able to do that effectively.
Yes.
Kristen?
Agreed.
All right, so we come back to what we started out here. Not started out, but we talked about this before, the resources. It is important that we take an inventory of the things that are available to us. That's not to say that we can't utilize anything else that we may have at the states. And we'll talk a little bit about that, especially in particular with Texas. But again, the constant is the rule. It's the FDA rule, okay? But that's what the constant is, okay? But there's other things in place, not just the rule, but other things in place that helps with the understanding of the rule, okay, that we also need to take into consideration. And then we put these things, or then FDA put these things in other ways. The at a glass documents, which is essentially the Reader's Digest version of what the guidance it puts out as far as that example. And then the fact sheets, okay, that bring a different set of examples and understanding to a particular area or section of the rule. All these things are integral parts of getting that reinforced knowledge, okay, when it comes to the rule, to be able to apply it. And all of these, okay, essentially were made for the public to have. We just put it all together in one particular area. Kristen?
Thanks, Renee. Can you all see the preamble here? Is that showing, Renee?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So this is one thing, and I had mentioned it before, is I felt that we were lacking this during our training or our get together, or whatever it is that we might call it, is these documents. We didn't use these documents. We just simply relied on Teresa to help the FDA person to help us out. I really wish I would have understood this a lot better from the beginning. So if you look here, I mean, this is just one of hundreds and hundreds. FDA does take, and I've learned this recently, FDA does take every single comment into consideration when they're looking at all the different rules and regulations. And if it's one comment from one person, they take that seriously. They review it, we discuss it. All of this, quite a bit of time to go through this preamble and answer these questions. So if you have questions, take a look at this one here. Comment 339, one commenter. Case in point, one commenter requests that FDA clarify that drop-covered produce may be used for personal consumption, for commercial processing, or for food for animals. So then what FDA does in response goes through a very thorough response on that. I know a lot of you already know this. I know a lot of you probably already use this, but until the last year or so, I wasn't using this appropriately. So I really wanted to bring this up, and I wanted to show you folks that if you have questions, a lot of times it's already answered here, and you can just hit the search button and it'll take you right to where it says drop covered produce every single time, and you can review it and see if your question is answered there. And for the most part, it's going to be. There might be a few little nuances to your question, but I think that if you read through it all, you'll be able to take from each of these comments and questions and answer your question. And so this is one document that we actually didn't use during our training, but I wish that we had, because it would have been something that I think a lot of us would have been able to take away some good information and a good resource to use. So if you're not already using it, please take a look at the preamble.
And if I can add, during our training, those individuals from FDA were referencing back to the preamble, so some of the questions that we're putting out there. And so that was one of the first things that they would do and look at it. Now, the way I was told to utilize this was to read the rule, and if I had questions or wasn't sure about it or needed more clarity, from that point, then go to the preamble to again, like I said, to get more clarification on that one particular area, one particular section. It would be mind melting if you try to read this thing as a single document in one sitting, okay? Because yes, your brain will literally melt if you try to do that and then come back with some sort of retention of anything. Some people can do it, I can't. But definitely utilizing this as an additional resource as you go through, the rule and each section of the rule is very, very beneficial.
And the why. I think the why too, Renee, I think you and I were talking about it earlier, is understanding the why something was put in the rule is also helpful to understand and will be addressed a lot of times in the preamble. You know,
that's a good point, because when we're doing inspections, some slightly different from what we're doing in outreach. For doing inspections, at least here in Texas, it really is, are you compliant or non-compliant? And most of the growers want to know, why aren't they, why doesn't what they're currently doing meeting their minimum requirements of the rule? Well, it would be easy to say, well, because the rule says so. But if you can explain the why behind it, okay, that brings a little bit more, that continues that education while we regulate, okay? And it is essentially a good part of what we should do to get that buy-in from the grower, but also as a education foundation for the inspector, okay? I want to talk a little bit about the site-specific education resources. I think Georgia brings a lot of good stuff, and I think a lot of people are doing something similar to that. We in Texas, we actually put together example guides, and I think we do have them as part of this package as well. Because right at the very beginning, we wanted to make sure that our guys, as they started talking to growers, simply about the produce safety rule, the first thing that growers wanted to know is that they were covered or not. And so a lot of emphasis went to really breaking down subpart A, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we move forward. And those became the first type of example guides that we created at the state to really facilitate the learning process for our new hires in a new program of this, at the time, new a rule, okay? The other things that we implemented or we put together during the training is scenarios, okay? One of the things that we did ask all the states that were participating was to bring examples, real life examples of scenarios that they have encountered, so that we could discuss those as part of the class, okay? That really brings in a lot of that discussion, not only of what they saw, but what could possibly be the issue of noncompliance. Again, we didn't go into writing, observations or anything like that, but simply discussing about what we saw or what was seen, and seeing if that measures up to what the minimum requirements of the rule, okay, is. I think the other thing that Georgia talked about was things that they're seeing out in the field. I think now as we start doing inspections, definitely is what we're doing here in Texas. We are utilizing data, the trending data or data to determine trends, so that we can look at, okay, what is the most commonly observation that is being written down? Is that per region? Is that per commodity? Is that per individuals making that? So data now that we're actually doing a lot of these things, is really become one of those fundamental tools that we're utilizing so that we can become better at implementing the role and seeing how we're doing that. It becomes a better tool for us as we move forward. And this is definitely one of the things I would encourage people to start doing if they're collecting that kind of data.
Yeah, and I think I just want to say here really quickly is it was really funny how this particular thing we were both doing exactly the same as we asked all the states to bring in their own specific examples so that we could talk about them and that they were state specific, region specific, and would be of interest to folks. So while we may have provided some example scenarios for you in this packet, we really want folks to use what is real and happening in their states and their regions. So yeah, that was the goal. That was the goal there. But I just thought it was funny how we both were doing the exact same thing, is gathering a group of states, asking them to bring some scenarios, and yeah, it was just a crazy discussion all the way around. Oh, and then I wanted to show one other thing that Texas has done, and I use it all the time. I stole it from Texas when I was there. Is
That's where that went.
Yes, the one you can't find.
Yeah.
They made a large print rule book. And I use this quite frequently. It's got nice tabs, but it's large print. And while it's great to use the small print one out in the field, and it's great to be able to refer to it really quickly, because we know where things are located. If you have people that are starting who aren't as familiar, I think this large print rule book was a really good idea. So I just wanted to throw that out for Texas.
Just looking at my good buddy Allison from Louisiana, she says she uses hers all the time. Outstanding. It is one of the things that we did in Texas. While we do find it beneficial to have the pocket guide, what we were finding out is that it was hard to, especially for outreach, it was hard to utilize that as a usable tool when showing growers, okay, where exactly does it say that? Because we got questioned quite a bit that where does it say that on the book and whatever. So we actually, and it's what I have here as well. So I don't know if you can see that or not. It's just a much bigger version of it. We actually have a table of contents. We have tabs on it. We have places to write notes. When we go do inspections, we give every grower that we do an initial inspection a book of this so they can follow along with what we're saying needs to be worked on. Okay, this was actually the textbook that we referred to throughout the course when we put things together in Dallas. Okay. So thanks for that. Thanks for that plug there, Kristen.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime, Renee.
Okay, so let's get to
wait
the.
a minute. Wait a minute.
Uh-oh.
Everybody wants to know if you can share this book.
You have to go to Texas and steal them, as far as I know.
Well, one of the things that, I don't think people know is that we actually invited Kristen when she was in mission to come down here so she can see what we're doing. It was then that we kind of really started putting together a lot of the stuff that we did. So when she was down here, we gifted it to her. Not saying you all have to come down to Texas, but I'm in a generous mood today. I think it's all the cough medicine I drank. If you send me an email with where I can mail it to you, I will send one. Okay, because I don't have everything. We still got to give them to growers. I will send one to every program or any, whatever programs out there, and then we'll work it that way. Is that fair?
So nice.
Yeah, I know. It's the no cussing rule that's got me changed.
I bet.
Okay. Oh yeah, and the email address is going to be put at the last slide, so then you get all our contact information here. So let's get to what we did and how we did it. Okay. Let's talk about the subparts. Okay. Really, we wanted to spend a lot of time going into the subparts, and my other good friend Justin up in Oklahoma, he doesn't know he's my other good friend, but quite honestly, I think he's probably my only friend. But that's for me and my therapist to work out. So Justin was telling me about all the other federal programs that he's part of. And one of the things that he did mention was that with other federal programs, they really take the time to go in and do section by section of that rule. Okay. And from my experience and my background, we did the exact same thing. I was just kind of, again, waiting to see if anybody, FDA, was going to do that in regards to this rule. And if they were, they're taking too long. It turns out that they weren't, so that's why we have this. Okay. And I think that's one of the things that really starts bringing into conversations about, well, I didn't know this and I didn't know that. And what do you mean by that? And here's a good example. Okay. Starting at the very beginning of the book, and we're starting subpart A, okay, 112.1. Okay. I think it's one of those things that needs to be put out, that the way this thing is written. Okay. First of all, like I said before, this is written in the Federal Code of Food, okay, which is again something different, okay, but it's still a regulation. I think it's interesting that the title of 12.1 is what food is covered by this part, okay. So subpart A starts with the scope of what is applicable to this rule. Okay, and it talks about what food is covered in this part. But interesting enough, the very first sentence of that talks about food that is produce. Okay, those two words, okay, as you can see here, are linked to a definition, which is a good thing because again, the definitions establish the language of the rule. Okay, and it's important to know that while all produce is food, not all food is produce, and this rule is very specific, okay, to produce. These are the kind of things that we went into in great depth from every single section, subsection, 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 okay, so that we started to kind of see, okay, how is this put together? Okay, for those people who aren't really experienced in federal regulations, it generally runs similar to this, where they talk about the scope, and sometimes it's either within a section or a part of an entire section. They start with, okay, definitions or definitions that are relevant to that section, and it goes from general to very specific. And that's what the designations for the subsections are about. Okay, while these things are sections, B1 is a subsection, and furthermore, okay, that's when we start getting more specific into what is relevant to that rule that supports the actual part of that section. Okay, I think if people don't understand how these things break down, the dynamics of the regulation and how it's put together, they're catching up. If they have a better understanding of how these things are aligned out, then they understand the flow of it. Okay, and I think that's a very important part of getting into the section as it needs to be. When you start hearing from your inspectors, well, this doesn't make sense to me, and I don't understand why they did that. And well, okay, there's a disconnect somewhere that needs to be addressed. Okay. Kristen?
I think you had that one covered. Thanks, Renee.
Okay. And keep in mind, I think the very important part of it is, like I keep saying, is the language. Okay, the definition provides a lot of good information, not as detailed as one would like, but it does emphasize the words that are important to that, okay, particular rule. Okay. Now, it's also very interesting that when you look at subpart A and you start looking at 112.3, which is the beginning of the definitions, that very first sentence, okay, basically links, okay, not only that language, but it links the rule, okay, to the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, okay, which means other words that are not identified specifically in 112.13, that means there can be located, okay, in the bigger act, okay, which then means someone needs to know what that means. Okay. I feel like I'm just rambling. Am I just rambling?
No, not at all. I had
Okay.
just moved it to the next slide, but yeah.
Oh,
you
okay.
just keep going.
Do we have any questions so far about this? Because essentially, this is what we did when we were all together in Dallas, and we spent a great amount of time on this. And for us in Texas, okay, when we started this in 2017, right after we hired our 4 initial people, the only concern that growers had at the time is, are they covered by this rule? So as not to melt the brains of our new hires, and definitely not to scare them away, because we kind of need them for the next day. All we really did was go over subpart A, and then we do examples of what could possibly be, okay, considered qualified exempt, not covered, okay, completely covered by the rule, so that they had a better understanding. Because again, the first people that they were going to talk to were going to be growers that just wanted to know if this pertained to us, okay? Because I don't know how many times we talk to growers and basically say, well, I'm not covered because my crops grow outside. There is no covering over them. Okay, that's what we had to work with. Kristen.
No, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think you covered it. Thank you.
Okay, so let me clarify, because I keep talking about the meeting that we had in Dallas. It was something that we put together in Texas. We invited the states that were connected to Texas, and then the states that were doing inspections or were getting to do inspections on their own authority. It was not publicized. It was a very specific invitation. It was only for certain states, certain programs. And yeah, it wasn't a national anything. It was something that was put together here in Texas. And because we put it here in Texas, I figure everybody should come to Texas. And so we invited everybody to come to Dallas. Those people who were there, those state programs who were there, some of those guys are on this call today. But again, it wasn't a big public thing. And quite honestly, I didn't know how it was going to be perceived or was going to be taken. We did have plans, or at least I had plans to do another one, or at least to go back and see, okay, based on what we're currently doing, what else do we need to do? But then the whole pandemic hit, and we were kind of our priorities got shifted and changed.
Yeah, same with us. We had our meeting ended up being in Wisconsin, and we had just a couple of the NCR, the North Central Region folks, different states joined us there. And I'll explain why we went to Wisconsin in just a little bit. But yeah, I was also unsure as to how ours was going to be perceived, how it was even going to come together in the end. So.
And not to sound like I just kept it all in the South, but I kept it all in the South. We just kind of reached out to the southern states. Everybody that we invited were part of the Southern Center, even though we didn't invite them. Um, but definitely it was for the states of the South.
And I think it helps though too to stay within your region because you have different products and different ways of growing things. And quite honestly, I've worked with a lot of farmers in my career, but different parts of the state, farmers, you have to approach farmers differently. And so I think the discussions would be slightly different, even though it's still supposed to be about the rural. I think your scenarios are going to be a little bit different. And also smaller groups are going to work the best in this particular situation. I don't think having a big group is going to work for this particular program at all.
I completely agree with that because he definitely, again, what we did and what we want to do, what we want to continue to promote is that continual interaction and that discussion. Even though we were all from the South, yeah, we had different and various opinions about certain things. But so it was actually very good to hear what other people were saying, what they were going through, because I think it even broadened our perspective of what everybody else was going to.
So I have brought up part 5.
Oh, okay.
And I think that this one is something that a lot of states are already dealing with and having to explain to their farms. But to discuss this with your inspectors prior to going out in full detail, because I've heard people, inspectors in states say they call their inspections audits, or they don't really describe the differences to their farmers very well. So I think that this is a very big thing for you to discuss with your inspectors and make sure that they're very clear that they call what they're doing an inspection. Again, I know that most of you are probably already doing that, but we just wanted to reiterate that. So that's a portion of this.
And for the different things that we had at the very beginning, we're still having growers who are thinking that us going there to schedule these things is voluntary. They think it's on-farm readiness review, or we just want to take a look and see what you're doing type of situation. We transitioned into doing inspection, and I think it's important that we definitely are upfront to the growers about that. Couple of things about this, because we're still having issues with this, especially with all the other, again, it's what happens when we're 15 years behind the time and there's already other things in place. I know that AFTO is working on a document that can help with this. Eric Bungo and all the good work that he's doing, putting that coordinated effort into place. I think it's going to be very beneficial to this as another way of getting that information out there. It's still an issue that we have to discuss and continue to having to explain. But the thing is, and this is part of the things that we're seeing here in Texas, and definitely from what I'm hearing from other states, the produce safety rule wasn't meant to be everything to everybody. It's a very specific rule to be applied in a particular situation, for a particular thing. Okay, we've got so many people who are involved in so many other third-party inspections and everything else that's out there. They're trying to make it fit into something that it's not. It's like trying to put a twin size sheet on a king size bed. It's going to cover something. It's just not going to be there for everybody. And again, investigations, completely opposite of the intent of the produce safety rule. The produce safety rule was meant and had the intention of being proactive. If you're involved in an investigation, something bad has already happened, and that whole proactive thing is just out the window at that point. Okay, so there's definitely a lot of different things that are already out there, but the produce safety rule is what we're responsible for. Okay, and it's definitely something that we need to make sure that while we're doing it consistently. Okay, and the growers understand our responsibility. Just got quiet in here. Is this thing working? Okay. All right. Anything else? Kristen? Okay, so we may have lost Kristen here. If we had the slide working, definitely we'll talk about, yes, of course, I am still here. I am the anchor that keeps the boat still.
If Amy can throw it up, if you can tell her what page you're on.
I am on slide 15, part 6. Amy,
Give her
I'm
one.
here. 1 second. Sorry.
you will be my new best friend if you can help me out here. No
Yeah.
disrespect to all my other new best friends.
Would you like to take a 5-minute break?
Oh, I think for everybody else, we should just keep on going. Is that right, guys? Yes.
Yeah, she's got it up.
Okay. So we
I don't know
take a
why.
look here. All right, thank you. So we broke this thing down again, and we're in part 6 here. Okay, the interactive inspectional process. The way we do things in Texas is really, again, to get the grower to talk about what they are currently doing. Okay, it's really not about, okay, are you doing this, yes or no? It really is about getting that information from them and determining what they are doing if it's meeting the minimum requirement of the rules. Okay, and so it really goes back into the information that we get is only as good as the questions we ask. Okay, we, Texas, did put together some things, and they're also attached to this. The on-farm talking points is one of the things that we gave to our guys as well, because it really was, how do you initiate that conversation so that you can get that information that you need to determine if the farm is meeting the minimum requirements or not. And it really goes back to, well, there should be that 80-20 split, okay, where you, the inspector or person who's trying to get that information, is only speaking 20% of the time, and the person you're trying to get the information from is giving you 80% of the information. Okay, how do you do that? Well, we've heard from the information from FD226, the big systems thinking, portion of that is really to engage that conversation with that particular grower or those individuals who are actually doing that activity. Okay, definitely you want to engage those questions, and we do have a copy of those questions. It's not inclusive. It's just a way to jumpstart the discussion. And I had to be very careful because didn't want to create a checklist. So it's essentially a lot of open-ended questions about particular areas of covered activities that are put on there. But again, the idea was to engage within the individuals who are doing that activity so we can determine if what they're doing, not only by sight, but by discussion, that they're meeting those minimum requirements. And again, this is where we are taking to heart, okay, the intent, okay, of this rule. Okay, we're not here to tell, okay, the growers what to do. As a matter of fact, I had another little sticky note from my other good best friend, Joe, Joe from NASDA, where just a couple of weeks ago, he took my line and basically said, we are not here to tell the farms what to do. Okay. We are simply here to see what they're doing, and based upon what they're doing, if they're meeting the minimum requirements of the rule. If they're not, we should be able to explain why and then hold them accountable to it. If they are, we should move on. Okay. And that right there is really talking about is getting those growers to talk about what they're doing. In Texas, you know, as you go to these big, large farms, they're always assigning that food safety person who's just so relaxed because it's just another audit. You know, I just had my third party inspection, and I just flying colors throughout their own thing. So I know what I'm going to show these guys, and I know what they want to know. That's why we talk to the workers, okay? Because yes, these guys that are the food safety people, they know what they need to say, but it's not until you see what's going on, and more importantly, have these discussions with the people actually doing the work, that you kind of find out, okay, what's really going on. Okay, I can be shown as many nice, pretty binders and documentation that is, you know, all put together that same day. But the real way to, you know, to see what's really going on is to start talking to people and being on the farms for as long as we need to, you know, to make that determination is what we promote here in Texas. Because people can fake stuff, and they can fake stuff for a long period of time, for a short period of time. Their true nature comes out, and it's just you know, we really want to see what's going on. That's how you get the best data. But a lot of it is to engage that conversation with that particular grower or those particular workers. And that also goes back to, you know, interactive listening. I was told a long time ago, and I still remember this today, that hearing is a sense, but listening is a skill. And with that in mind, we definitely want to take into consideration, you know, what we're doing to engage the communication process and make sure that we're listening to what is being said, and work with that to ask more questions, because that's how we truly get the data that we need to determine if they're meeting compliance or not. Kristen?
I think I'm back. Am I back?
Oh, okay. There you go. There you go.
So sorry about that. I don't know where I came in, so I'm not even going to add to this one. I'm sure Renee covered it all.
Except the abandonment issues that I now have, but you know, that's for me and the therapist. It's going to be a busy time at the therapist this week. I'll tell you what.
So are you good with that one? Do you want to move to the next one?
I can talk a little bit more, because I think part of this, again, when we talk to the growers about the rule, and especially when you talk to the growers who have read the rule, and we hear this from a lot of inspectors too, not from this state, but other places. They're the first one to say, you know what, I wish that rule just tell us exactly what to do. Okay, if they were just very specific about this, then that's what that's what I can implement. But the rule wasn't meant to be that. Okay, the rule is not vague; it's flexible. Okay, for the part of the grower. Okay, because everything is going to be different, has the potential to be different, from large farms to very small farms, from the north of your area to the southern part of your area. Things are going to be slightly different, but the rule needs to be consistent. And what our job is to make that determination that what they're currently doing meets the minimum requirement of the rules. But if you don't know and understand the rule to begin with, you're going to have trouble implementing. Kristen?
Agreed. No, I agree.
Any questions?
Coming in late, it's hard to add anything, but yeah. Any questions, thoughts, comments?
No, just let me run wild.
Try to avoid that.
That's why I have sticky notes, no cussing.
We only have a couple more slides, so
hang in there. Hang in there, y'all.
All right,
okay.
Next slide, please.
Part 7. There you go. There you go. Kristen, why don't you talk a little bit about this?
Well, so enforcement discretion, we all know that there's enforcement discretion for certain things within the rule. A couple of them are, the hops, wine grapes, almonds, pulse crops. That's one enforcement discretion document, because it was noted that while they were included as covered commodities, that through some discussion, comments, and different things, those are definitely not products that are usually eaten raw. So the FDA wrote up an enforcement discretion document for that. There's also enforcement discretion for BSAO pre-harvest intervals, written assurances from buyers for commercial processing. Now the farmer still has to write something on their label, their package, whatever it is, their bill of lading, whatever it is they need to do. But the enforcement is on the paperwork back from the buyer to the farmer. That's still being worked out. And there's probably a couple other ones that I've missed. But we want to make sure that our inspectors are aware of these things, because while it's still written in the rule, there is enforcement discretion that it's not, unless it's going to be an egregious condition, which we talk about later, and in certain of these items certainly can be, it is not something that inspectors should be inspecting at the moment, including all of subpart E. That's included as well. So getting into an egregious condition, I don't know, Amy, if you have that document available to come up or not. The standardized approach to produce farm inspections that was developed a few years back. Renee and I were part of this group, and I know there was a few others that are on this call now that were also on this group. But on page 29, there is a definition of egregious conditions that was a definition agreed upon within NASDA and FDA, this work group here that I'm talking about. And right there. The definition says a practice, condition, or situation on a farm or in a packing house that is reasonably likely to lead to. And so when we're talking about egregious conditions on a produce farm, we need to make sure that our inspectors know this definition, because this is the one that's been agreed upon for NASDA and FDA for all produce farms. So while your state may already have a definition of egregious, because some folks do in their food world, that should only stay with your other types of food in those programs. You don't want it leaking over into this program, because this is the definition that we are held to. And I think that the tendency sometimes, because we do hire folks from manufacturing and other food programs, is that they already know that definition from their old programs and they're applying it to this. So another big thing here is to make sure that we have these documents, and here's another reference document that we have to make sure that our inspectors are aware of, so they can reference it, not read through it as Renee might say and melt your brain, but to reference it and make sure that they have this available. So this is just another document that we want to make sure that that's there for them.
And if I may add, okay, this is not a term that we should be throwing out lightly in regards to the produce safety on the farm, unless of course it's actually there. Okay. Interesting to note that the word egregious does not appear in the produce safety rule. Because of that, it could be somewhat difficult to reference that as a particular standard if it's not a part of something within your program. We here in Texas had to adopt that definition, okay, so that it could be part of our plan. And more importantly, should things go that way, we have a standard to show where compliance and enforcement may have to get involved. Okay, so for other program practicalities, we had to not only adopt this definition, but this is how we are training our people to determine that these conditions have to be met in order for this word to apply. Okay. We've gotten this through NASDA. I'm sorry. We have gotten this from NASDA, so it's out there already. But definitely it is that handout, just that portion of the handout, Appendix 7, is a link into that outline that we keep talking about. Okay, so all this information that we're covering and talking about is there. If you want the whole thing, I think NASA has put it out to people. If not, definitely contact either myself or Kristen, or even Brenda might have that available as well. So
Yeah,
we
I'll
do have that.
email it out to Connie, no problem. Because
Okay.
I have it in a Word document right now, but yeah, Appendix 8, the egregious conditions, like Renee said, is a part of the outline that we sent to you in for this packet.
Yeah, and another thing is that the Texas Department of Agriculture did have the word egregious already in its definition, but it, just like what Kristen said, it had no meaning to food. I think it was more for pesticides or floral or something. And so again, rather than develop one, we just adopted this as part of our standards, and more importantly for the penalty matrix that we produced. Okay, so you definitely take that into consideration. The other thing that we want to talk about is definitely here in Texas, as we work closely with Department of State Health Services, who do the manufacturing, a completely different state entity, but also because we do in Texas is the import facility for a lot of fruits and vegetables, produce that come in from Mexico and South America. It is also beneficial that you kind of understand how other aspects of FSMA and other programs interrelate with the produce safety rule. I'm not telling everybody to go out there and take these classes as much as have a good understanding of what these things are and how they may impact what you're doing. The other thing is definitely you want to talk about, how things are being done from one state to the next. It's really the most beneficial collaboration that we have continued to have here in Texas and the neighboring states, is to continue to talk to each other about what we're doing. We have had situations where we had a farm growing here in Texas, but their packing house was in New Mexico. We have people who are growing stuff here, but selling to Louisiana buyers over here. We actually had a situation where we had a farm we have actually two farms that we know of that their headquarters are actually in California. Okay, so the continuous collaboration and talking and discussion with other farms, not other farms, with other states regarding farms would be a great benefit, especially when you get into that conflict of how do you guys do this and how do you all do that. That could also help think about how you're doing things, within your state, but probably give some different insights to what can be done within your state. Kristen?
Sorry, I keep going on mute and unmuting. I'm not doing very good. No, I don't have anything to add. But Amy, can you go back to the slides, please? Okay. Yeah, well, I do, sorry. Yeah, I want to add something because I was talking about it before with Wisconsin and how they had an outbreak. And while outbreaks are kind of outside of this, it just got us to thinking that we do have a lot of states where we're having farms grow in one area, pack in the other, or they own farms in two different states. And we wanted to make sure that they got the same inspection in Michigan that they do in Georgia. Again, not the same style. We're all going to have different styles, but the same implementation and consistency within the rule. So making sure that we had communications with different states was a very big focus for me. especially the states that touch Michigan, but also with places like Florida and Georgia, because we do have a lot of farmers that have facilities in both. So I think that that's one thing that we want to make sure that we continue to do is have discussions and communications with each other throughout the nation, because I think the more that we know each other, the more that we've had discussions, the better that it's going to end up with for the farm when we have to end up dealing with a situation. And rather than all of a sudden a situation is in our laps and I don't know Renee and I have to make this rapport with him all of a sudden, that doesn't work as well as Renee and I now know each other for, several years. We have apparently good rapport, and could maybe help out a farm better in that situation.
I agree.
So next slide, I think. This is our final.
Yeah, I think this is all you. One of the things that we did not do in Texas is take the information outside the classroom. I really wanted to focus on the education part of it and complete classroom activity, and picking a spot where everybody could come to, because a lot of the growing areas that we have are further south, and at that time that we put our class together, it was really unsure if we were going to do anything. So that to me was okay. This is going way beyond what we could possibly do. So let's just stick to the education portion of it. But Kristen had different plans and ideas, and I think they had different types of success with that. And I think it's a good thing to talk about, taking all this stuff and then actually reinforcing the ideas, in such an activity. Scenarios can help with that, but really, taking it to the next level, going outside the classroom, I think can be very beneficial. So Kristen, you want to talk about what you guys did?
Yeah, so in one of the documents that we provide you, we provide both agendas. We provide an indoor only agenda and then we provide an indoor outdoor agenda. And so this is what we did. Michigan and Wisconsin worked together to develop this. We ended up having it in Wisconsin because they had an educational farm available for this that was doing some harvesting. So after we had some discussion about the rule, we split up into small groups of 3 or 4 different inspectors. One of the FDA person that was in attendance was one quote unquote farmer. The PSA person in attendance was another farmer. There was, I think, one other person that worked at the farm, helped us out as a farmer, and then the main manager at the farm was our farmer as well for each group. We did have a group discussion prior with just the quote unquote farmers, with the farm manager, so she could talk us through the farm, kind of give us an overview of what that was. And so we would have a lot of the same answers because we wanted to make sure that the different groups could come together and talk about the same thing. So after we had that group meeting, everybody, all the farms knew what they were going to say. We split everybody up in groups. And by the way, the farm meeting was a couple days prior to everybody getting together. So we were really kind of making sure everybody had their ducks in a row. Then we set out and we set the groups out in different sections of the farm. So we weren't all on top of each other. Set half the day to go around this farm, about 2-3 hours to go around this farm. We asked that each group allow each inspector in that group to take a portion of the farm. And then we went back to the classroom and kind of did a hot wash on that. The inspectors that were in the program said that they really enjoyed it, not only because of the mock inspection, but they really enjoyed seeing other inspector styles, how they asked the questions, how they approached the farmer, how they had them look at different parts of the field. So they really enjoyed that portion of it. How they put the training to use. And they I think that they just enjoyed being interactive with other states, because everybody is teaching their inspectors differently, so it helped gain some knowledge and some different tools that way. When we did have the group discussion after, we asked each group to kind of go over their notes and come up with their top 3 areas of concern for this particular farm. And luckily, it turned out that each group had the same top 3 concerns. So it seemed like for that particular exercise and that particular day of training that we all had it right, that everybody understood the rule in that time and put it to use in the same way. So it kind of was really cool. I think that in the discussions I had with folks after, is that while they felt that the classroom discussion was very valuable, they really felt that this mock inspection part was extremely valuable, especially for being new or just starting up as an inspector. And I don't know if there's anybody on that was there. I haven't looked. But if there's any concerns.
So I will say that almost a year before that, New Mexico did something very similar to that. They were gracious enough to invite quite a few people. I remember the guys from Hawaii making that long trip to be a part of that as well. And again, that's where, you know, Oklahoma and Louisiana and we started talking about, okay, what else, what next? So we do have a lot of states who are really trying to fill in a lot of these gaps with what we need in order to prepare our people to go out there and do this kind of work. What Kristen and I did basically was put in a lot of this stuff together, put it in one place, and you know, talk a little bit about the strategies of what can be done. Consistency, as we all know, based upon what NASA has put out and what definitely what FDA has put out, is going to be a very big thing within these next 5 years. It is based upon, okay, what we're doing, what we should be doing, or what we can be doing, that's going to establish the basis for that. And even though Kristen now is with FDA, I will continuously say that you shouldn't wait for FDA to be the answer to all your needs. Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with saying that. I mean, it's just there's a lot of things that FDA is working on, and there's a lot of things that we can't. And I think that also with the new CAP grant, it's, you know, I understand that there's going to be some stretch on education dollars, and so we thought this was a really good time to lay this out and hopefully provide a low-cost training method. And you know, another tool, like I said earlier, for each state.
And again, as the whole calibration program starts developing into something that will be implemented, it's the things that we're doing now, and in order to prepare, you know, the guys who are doing this stuff out in the field, I think that's going to be crucial, because I don't think, and this is just my opinion, we should train people on how to get through the calibration. I think we should train people to do effective and consistently the job that we were going to do. If we do that, then we shouldn't have to worry about the calibration whatsoever.
Yep, that's completely true, and I think that's a great way to think about it. Is we're not training our folks to get through a calibration. We're training our folks to do an inspection and consistently implement the produce safety rule.
I want to, again, open it up for anybody who might have a question, want to ask some information, want to share something that you know, that you're doing that falls along into the same lines that they're talking about today. Please feel free to raise your hand and talk to us, or put something in the chat box and let us address it. We want to make sure that you get as much out of this today as you can. So I'll open it up to raise your hand or put it in the chat box.
Yeah, because this constitutes the very last slide. The next slide is basically if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, and the forum we wanted here today was, like I said earlier, informal and conversational. So please add in what you're doing or any other thoughts, suggestions would be beneficial for everybody.
It's been a quiet group today. Anybody? Here we go. A good job.
Oh,
I agree with that. I think you both have done a great job in putting all this information together and sharing it with the states. And so we do appreciate not only the fact that you've been here to present it today, but that you have taken your time to put it all together. Any last parting words from the two of you before I share the last little bit about the resources?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's anybody on the participant group that would be willing to say if this is what they thought it was going to be, or if this was helpful, or anything, because we want to make sure that what we're providing to people is helpful, and if it's not, then we don't want to continue on.
No response.
yeah, if I can say, I'm taking all my sticky notes off because since it's closing, I don't need all my restrictions at this point.
Still being recorded, Renee.
Oh yeah, there's that. Okay. Let me rethink the strategy here. No, y'all, we know based upon the next 5 years in the CAP agreement that we still have additional struggles that we're going to have to go through. Okay, whether you're under FDA authority or you're doing your own state plan. Okay, no one said this job was going to be easy from the get-go, but we still have a job to do. Okay, we owe it to the growers, the producers, okay, to do the job as best as we possibly can. And we owe it to our neighbors, and we owe it to the, you know, what we're here to do is to prevent people from getting sick. That's our greater responsibility. There's going to be more challenges, no doubt. I don't know what they are, but I just know that they're going to come. Okay, but that shouldn't deter us from doing the job as best we possibly can. Okay, and to continue working with each other, talking to each other, and in cases like what we're doing here, share what you've got with everybody else, because it can only benefit, okay, the program as a whole. Okay, we're happy to be able to provide this information, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and together we can all work this out. Okay, definitely want to thank Brenda and AFTO for putting this together and giving us this platform. Again, we only talked about education, and we only did it for a short amount of time, but there's still more work to be done.
Yes, thank you,
Any
Brenda.
final comments?
Yeah, Brenda, I was going to just say thank you so much to you and AFTO for all the hard work that you guys did in helping us put this all together. I just hope that we can continue to have these kind of forums where there's a group of folks getting together to share ideas and put that out for everyone to utilize.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
I want to, okay. Well, one of the things I'd like to say in closing is if you have an idea of some information that you would like to see developed and presented, by all means, please forward that to me, and I will make sure that the Produce Safety Committee receives that and see if it's a charge that they may want to add and work on for you, because we're definitely in this for you and providing resources where we can and when we can. I want to thank Renee and Kristen for your work today. I know how much work you have put into this, and it is greatly appreciated. To all of you who attended, we thank you very much. We will follow up again after this with an email that has the resources that available for you, everything they've talked about today, along with all the tools that you may need to begin to put together the education work that you need possibly within your state utilizing this information. So again, thanks so much to all of you for attending today, and we hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.